Hey guys, welcome. For today's practice, we're going to focus primarily on our hips and from both ends of the spectrum, from creating support and stability and also keeping range of motion, mobility going on within the hip joints. Sometimes we think about just as stretch when things get a little tight, but I think it's important we have both, especially when we're working through maybe this recover and rebuild portion that maybe we've been sitting a lot and it feels like there's less range of motion, things are feeling a little tighter. So we want to get that mobility moving, or possibly that if they're feeling a little weaker, right, maybe haven't been able to be as active and strong, and we're trying to rebuild that. And so we'll create both. How does it feel to find good support? And then also have good range of motion so that it doesn't feel locked up, like too stable, or just so loose that we don't have the support in there. So we're working that from both sides. So you're going to want to have either a rolled up blanket, this is a nice firm blanket, even a towel roll will work really well for that. And we'll use that in a minute so you can just set that off to the side or go grab that and come back. And then we'll begin today in child's pose. So with knees wide, big toes together, you can settle hips back to heels. You could also, before you roll your blanket or towel, if you wanted a little bit of support behind your knees, sometimes that feels really good here. And then just walk your hands forward to wherever they're most comfortable. You can have arms back a little bit more for support or further forward. And then let your forehead rest to your mat or to a block or any kind of support there. And then as you let your hips settle back towards your heels, and let your forehead rest to your support, just take some fuller breaths. Not to force it. And start to tune in and let the breath expand. And with your belly here between your thighs, see if you can just get soft through your belly so the breath goes there. Your belly is another good place, right? We want that support for the structure, help of the low back, but also just soft enough so there's room for breath. And just let yourself set the rhythm here, that connection to your breath through your practice. We'll work a little bit more through some of the anatomy today and finding the stability, but still letting breath be the most important part of our practice, what we come back to, what helps us stay connected to how our body feels and what we need or don't need today. And so take just a few more breaths like that. And with your next inhale, slide forward to tabletop. And go ahead, bring your knees together. You're going to tuck your toes under and put the inner edges of your feet together. So if you can squeeze heels towards one another, that's great. And then walk your hands back so that you sit your heels or your hips on your heels. And you might have to reach back and just get the little pinky toes involved there. If they're short like mine, they don't always tuck under. And then I just like to just stay here to start with and see where the sensation's at in the bottom of my feet. This might be a really good stopping point, and stay right here. Kind of the next level of it is bring your hands to a block. If it feels like it's appropriate today, you can bring your hands to your thighs. This one often causes a fair amount of sensation. So find the right place for you where there's sensation, but you also feel like you can support yourself. You're not gripping against the pose. And you can even soften or close your eyes and just take a moment and settle back into that sensation of your breath. Yeah, and you might be thinking, Amy just said that we're going to work into the hips, and this does not feel like my hips. It's true, it's your feet. The reason we start here, well, it's all connected. We have this one long sheet of fascia, of connective tissue that runs from our feet all the way up the whole back line of our body. Think about like a big bed sheet that covers over all the tissues. And so when we just start to work into feet and we'll work a little into calves, it's a great way to warm up the tissue on the back line of the body and start to get a little more range of motion there. And when that tissue gets tight or bound up, it kind of pulls like a big bed sheet if you pull it in from the middle and the wrinkles in there, and then it starts to pull and tug on other places. So getting that space in the fascia can help to create space all along that backside of your body. Okay, if you're still with me, just take another breath or two. You can always come forward, find a little bit more support. Good. And then walk your way out. Untuck your toes, press the tops of your feet down, and then just for a moment again, sit back towards your heels, walk your hands back, and just lift your knees up. It might just be an inch or so, just to stretch that counter stretch across the tops of your feet and your ankles. And then release that. Come forward again. And just for a moment, stretch out, right foot out with your foot down, rock back and forth a little bit. Just open up ankles and knees after that. Get the joints warmed up. And then you can do the same on the other side, left foot back. Just rock back and forth. Okay, and then from tabletop, grab your blanket or your towel roll, and you can snuggle that right behind your knees. And you can adjust once you get back. If you have a pretty thick towel roll, like blanket roll like I do, and you want to make it smaller, you can always come back out and adjust, just depending on amount of sensation. And then you're going to walk back again here like we just did, but the tops of your feet are down this time. And you think, I feel that in my calves. Great. And you have those same options. You can keep your hands down. You can bring hands to a block, or even a foam roller would work for this if you have that, or hands to your thighs. And again, if you get like, this feels pretty thick, you can unroll it a little bit and just take a thinner roll there. Like we did before, let your hips settle down towards your heels so that you're going with gravity and not resisting it. And then you can hang out in stillness, or you can just take a little gentle rock, an inch or two in each direction of your hip side to side. And that might just feel like a little massage, maybe a deep tissue massage for the calves. So we can get in between these, there's two lobes to that surface muscle of your calf. And it just starts to get in there. And again, we're just targeting that fascia, that connective tissue all along the back line. And so you get calves, but I tend to feel a little hamstring in here as we kind of mush them all together. And just start to warm up all the tissues. And then sit up a little bit and just scoot it down a few inches, find one other spot, and then let your hips come back down towards your heels. And you can do the same, take a couple breaths here just in stillness. Let that compression start to open up the tissue, or a little rock side to side to massage out through calves. Especially it feels like you spend a lot of time sitting, lying down, which especially when we're just coming out of treatment. If that's where you're at, then maybe there was a little more rest involved, which we need, but then we know sometimes can just affect how our bodies feel, mobility-wise, flexibility-wise. And then come forward, you can slide your blanket roll out, set it off to the side, and then come forward and come back to down dog. So get strong through your hands, lift your hips, and if down dog's not feeling quite great yet, stay in tabletop. Always a great variation. And start to build that strength and stability through shoulders without as much weight as down dog. And if you're in tabletop, you can take a couple rounds of cat-cow. If you're in down dog, just a nice low bend, pedal of one knee and then the other. So you can feel that space that you created along the back line of the body, calves, ankles, hamstrings,
Comes all the way up to hips and even into low back. Just go nice and slow. And so getting a little bit of the movement, mobility, range of motion going first. And then come to stillness and down dog and walk your hands back to your feet so you come to the back of your mat. You can always bend knees here if you want a little bit more room. Still along the back line, that's always a great way to support. And then go ahead and take a hold of opposite elbows and let the top of your head hang. You can balance the weight front to back on your feet so it feels steady and stable. And then squeeze your inner legs towards one another like you were squeezing a block in between your legs. Roll your sitting bones right at the base of the glutes up and wide. So we create some more space along the back of the legs. And then squeeze your outer hips in. Almost, and you can even do this, actually, sometimes it really helps, is take your hands to your outer hips and press in. So you can get that sensation of what does outer hips in feel like. You just press in. And that's where we really start to create that stability through the hips. And so that from the legs all the way up to the hips feels strong and supported, even as we create some space through hamstrings, calves, low backs here with the forward fold. Good. Just take another full round of breath there. Keep breath smooth and slow and steady. And then bend your knees enough to get your hands down to your mat. Take your feet towards the outer edges of your mat. Turn your toes out an inch or two, and then bend your knees, sit down to squat. And if this full range of motion doesn't feel the right choice today, up on a block is a good variation, or even here with feet a little wider and elbows to thighs. So some of us have a lot of range of motion in areas like this. That would be me. Sometimes too much range of motion. Right? So we want to find that balance, stability and mobility and flexibility. From here, wherever you are, squeeze your inner legs, lengthen up through your spine, and then just shift your weight a little bit side to side, one foot to the other. And so from the stability that we've created now, feel what a little range of motion feels like. Our pelvis has a ton of different ranges of motion, front to back, side to side, independent of each other. Just feel how they move together. Come back to center, release your hands, lift your hips, and then just walk your feet back in so they're about hip width apart, two fists in between. Bring your hands to your hips, and then just nice and slow. We've been down for a little bit. Come all the way up. Bring your hands together at your heart. Give yourself a breath or two just to adjust now to head above heart, all the way standing. And then you can keep your feet wide or hip width apart, or bring your big toes together to touch. See what helps most with balance or stability. With your inhale, reach both arms up. And then exhale, bend your knees, sit back to squat and chair pose, Utkatasana. And then a couple of options here. You can keep arms up. Sometimes that feels good to build some strength in the shoulders. Sometimes that feels like a lot. And just bring your hands together at your heart. And then similar to what we did in the forward fold, squeeze your legs in towards center. They don't have to touch, right? So if your feet are a little bit wider, then your knees are a little bit wider. If your feet are together, knees are together. So they just match one another. You find some lift through your belly. That helps support the pelvis. And then you can even, again, take hands to hips and squeeze your outer hips in. So it feels like you're hugging in all around your pelvis for support. Right? Strengthen and support. And from there, take one more full round of breath. And then with your inhale, stand all the way up, reach your arms up. And then nice and slow, exhale, fold forward. And then walk your hands forward again, downward facing dog. Or tabletop. From here, step your right foot forward. Come to low lunge so you can
walk your hands back to frame your front foot. You could have blocks here. Sometimes that's a nice way to get your arms a little bit longer. And just keep the back knee lifted as long as that feels okay. And then to find the support here, squeeze your inner legs together. Wrap your right sitting bone under, like you could scoop the glute under. And find a little support through your belly so it doesn't feel like you're just resting on your thigh. And then make your back legs strong. It might have a little bend in it. Sometimes it actually feels nice to give the low back a little bit more room. But press the thigh up towards the ceiling so we start to turn on, strengthen the leg while you're creating some space through that front line of the hip. And then the next inhale, step all the way forward. And with your exhale, step your right foot back, left foot forward. And then just bring hands to frame your front foot. You can widen your stance side to side too. Sometimes that feels more stable. And a little squeeze of your inner legs together. Scoop your left hip, right, left sitting bone in and under. So it doesn't feel like it's just swaying out to the side. And it's a straight line between your knee and your hip. And just moving in that direction. And we'll tone through your belly. And then press your back leg up towards the ceiling. And if it feels like your chin's dropping down towards your chest, lengthen out through the top of your head. And with your next inhale, step all the way forward. And set your blocks off to the side if you're using that. Bring your hands to your hips. Inhale, come all the way up to standing. Exhale, bring your hands together at your heart. Take a breath. Next inhale, reach both arms up. Exhale, bend your knees, sit back, chair. Right, and you can come just a little, you can come further down, just see where it feels supportive for you today. And let's start here with hands to hips. Do that same, compact your outer hips in, squeeze your inner legs together so it feels really supportive all around your pelvis. Good. And then one more time, reach your arms up overhead as you inhale. And this time as you exhale, sweep your right arm back, left arm forward, and let your left hip, left side of your hip, come forward a little bit with a twist. Okay, both arms back up to center, inhale. And then left arm back, right arm forward, and let your right hip slide a little bit forward. Good. Move side to side with your breath. Reach up, twist back. So now we're letting a little bit more of that mobility, range of motion come within the pelvis. Lift up to your left instead of just the stability. Okay, let's come one more time each side. Right arm back. And for some of us, just that too much stability in the twist can jam up the low back. Reach up and to the left. So sometimes a little bit of range of motion feels good to release the pressure with that SI joint at the low back. Reach both arms up, stand up, and then exhale, fold forward. Okay, from here, walk your hands forward so they're underneath your shoulders. This is another great place to grab blocks. Start with your feet together, and then shift your weight to your left foot. Reach your right leg up behind you. And it might lift halfway. We're along that spectrum. I'm going to start with the stability here. So roll your right inner thigh up towards the ceiling. Squeeze your outer hips in. So we're starting to get that sensation, just like your hands are pressing your outer hips in towards center. And then with that stability, maybe your right heel can lift just a little bit higher. The other nice place to find support is in the transition between poses. And we're going to do that here. So keep your outer hip squeezing in. Bring your right hand to your hip, and then roll your right hip open, half moon pose, Ardha Chandrasana. Get a little bit more into the balance. So if you want to stay here, working that balance part here in the standing splits, do that. It'd be helpful to come to a wall or hand to couch or table. You can do that as well. And keep that stability through the outer hips. Root down into your left foot. You can keep your right hand to your hip or reach your top arm up.
Make your floating leg, your right leg strong, flex your foot. And sometimes the stability so helps to support the balance. Good. And then with strong outer hips, roll your right hip back down. Bring both feet down to your mat. And then just fold in, take a breath or two. You can bend knees or even pedal legs one side to the other. Okay, and then come back to center. Shift your weight to your right foot and sweep your left leg up. And height of the leg does not matter. And focus more on the stability here of the pelvis. And so roll your left inner thigh up towards the ceiling. Flex your foot. And then squeeze outer hips into center. You might even just feel everything feel like it kind of knits in towards the midline. Okay, keep that. Press down into your right foot. And then with your left hand to your hip, roll your hip open. Half moon pose, Ardha Chandrasana. Again, if you want a little bit more support, furniture, wall, or stay in the standing splits with both hands down to the block. Squeeze outer hips in and keep hand to hip or reach your top arm up. And take one more full breath in, squeezing outer hips, start to stabilize for the transition. And then roll your left hip down. Bring both feet down to your mat. Good. Set your blocks off to the side. Plant your hands and then step back, downward facing dog or tabletop if that feels like a good choice here. Take a full round of breath. And from down dog, step your right foot forward. Hands to frame your front foot. Something you can grab blocks if you want that support there. And just set up the stability like we had before. So as you squeeze your inner legs in, wrap your right hip under. So right, exaggeration, but you don't want to just be swaying out to the side. And sometimes that can happen when places might be a little bit tighter, less flexible. And then with your back leg, make it strong and find some lift with your belly. Take a full breath in. And find a little movement with the back leg as you exhale, lower your back knee down to hover or to touch your mat. Inhale, press it back up and just move with that connection to your breath. Exhale, lower. Inhale, lift. Nice. Couple times there, just exploring now a little more mobility through the front of your hip. Press back up and lower down. Good. Let's take one more, lengthen it back up. And then bring your knee all the way down. Okay, from here, bring your hands to your front thigh. Bring your upper body up. Okay, squeeze your legs in towards one another. And then draw your outer right hip back. Squeeze the outer hips in. Feel that stability. And then with that support, let the hips come forward a little bit. Maybe that might be a millimeter or a little further forward, but we have the support, right, for that range of motion in the front of the hip. And you can reach both arms up overhead. You're welcome to keep hands to thigh. And for a little bit more shoulder opening here, just so we don't neglect shoulders altogether while we're working on hips, you can grab opposite forearms or elbows. And just feel into the support and the range of motion. And does it feel like you need a little bit more of one or the other? Right? Some days that's different. Sometimes depending on what our bodies are going through, that's different. Sometimes it's just even the structure of our bodies and what we need that's different. And release your arms. Exhale, plant your hands, lift your back knee, and then step back again, down dog. Take a full breath in, full breath out. And then step your left foot forward. You can grab blocks if you want. Just make sure that your knee is stacked over your ankle or even a little bit behind, just so that your knee's not way out in front.
of your ankle there. We want to support the knees as well as the hips here. Okay, find your stability. Squeeze legs together. Find some lift through your belly so your torso feels supported too. And start with your back leg strong as you press your thigh up. Take a full breath in. Just lead with your breath as you exhale. Lower your knee. It might just be an inch or two. It might come to tap your mat. Inhale, bring it back up. And exhale, lower down. Go slow enough that you can feel where you're creating that range of motion, that mobility, fluidity through the joint. Lower down. And lift up. Good. Take two more, nice and slow. And lift. And then come on back down. Good. From here, keep your back knee down. Bring your front hand to your front thigh. And then to set up the foundation here, as you draw your outer left hip back, squeeze both hips in and find some lift through the low belly. And you can stay pretty upright. If that feels like enough in the front of the hip, stay there, or let your hips start to move forward a little without losing the support. And so exploring that combination of both strength and then some range of motion in the stretch. You can keep hands to thigh, reach arms up, or take a hold of forearms or elbows. Good. Take your gaze forward so your chin's out of your chest. Find a steady rhythm of breath. Just feel into how that balance of stability, support feels here. Right. And some of us just by nature, right, we have a little less range of motion, we need more mobility. Some of us have a lot of range of motion or flexibility and need more stability. How do we find that middle ground between the two? Okay, both arms up, inhale, hands to your mat, exhale, and lift your back knee, step all the way forward. You can set your blocks off to the side, bring your hands to your hips, and with strong legs, inhale, come all the way up. Exhale, bring your hands together at your heart, and take a nice full round of breath. Okay. And start with your feet together. Find a focus point for your eyes, so somewhere we can help with balance. And you're going to bend your knees, sit back, just like you're coming to chair pose like we did before. Shift your weight off onto your left foot, and then bring your right knee over. And if you're by a wall and you want a little bit more support, like I often offer for balance poses, do that. Sometimes it's really helpful. You can work where we're going with legs without having to worry as much about the balance. Okay, you can have toes down or shins parallel. And then just for a moment here, really let your right hip slide forward to kind of unplug the stability. And sometimes if you're going for the wrap of the toes, it might help you to get the space for that. And also just might help you give you a little bit more wrap of your knees, just by letting that range of motion go. Then once you're wherever your legs want to be, start to draw your outer right hip back and then squeeze hips in, squeeze inner thighs in for that stability and support. Right? Shins here, toes down, or maybe the wrap. And then bring arms out wide to T. As you exhale, wrap right arm underneath left. You can do hands to shoulders or the wrap of your palms. Good. Keep legs hugging in. And maybe take a little bit more bend into your knees as you lift your elbows in line with your shoulders. And then just take two more full rounds of breath. Right. There's a steadiness in the balance, a strength, but also enough fluidity to let things wobble a little bit. And unwind, bring hands to heart. You can shake legs out. Take a breath. And then we'll switch sides. I'm going to show you just from each side. And so start bend knees. Shift your weight to your right leg. Stack left knee on top.
Right, toes down, shins parallel, or maybe you start to let your left hip unplug side forward and wrap the toes around. Maybe. Maybe that unplug just gives you a little more cross of the knees today. And then draw the outer hip back, left outer hip back. Hug your hips in, hug your inner thighs in. So that coming back to midline to help with balance. And then bring arms out wide and wrap left arm under right, either hands to shoulders or take the wrap. And from the stability, settle down with your hips. Lift up with your shoulders. Just take a steady gaze with your eyes. And as you explore both sides, you might start to realize which one you need a little more of. Right? Sometimes we're always focused on that stretch, stretch, stretch. And sometimes we need a little bit more strength to support it as well. And unwind, come all the way up, shake it out. Bring your hands together at your heart. Take a breath. Inhale, reach both arms up. And then exhale, fold forward. Plant your hands, step back, down dog. Okay, from down dog, bring your right knee behind your right wrist, pigeon pose. You can always take figure 4 on your back here. For some of us, this just isn't the greatest variation for hips and knees. So that's always a great option here. And then to start with, keep your left toes tucked under and just look back to see that left hip, knee, and ankle are all in a straight line. And a little strength of your inner legs. Right, so we're going to go for a little support and mobility at the front of the left hip first. With your left toes tucked under, press into your toes. Lift your knee up off the mat. Doesn't have to lift high until you feel like, yep, there's some sensation in my outer hip. So keep drawing right hip back and let your outer left hip roll forward an inch or two. Stay lifted through your chest. Take a breath, a different range of motion in pigeon. Then bring your knee back down. You can keep toes tucked or untuck and then fold forward. And you can always place a block or your blanket roll or some support under your left hip. Good. And as you fold forward, just try not to lose all of that stability in the legs. And sometimes when we come into these big stretches, we just kind of collapse into it. We want to maintain the support around it so it doesn't feel like we're just putting a lot of pressure on the joints. And just play with where that feels like in your body, enough support. And then enough softness that now we are creating some good stretch, trying through the outer hip or inner leg, or maybe a little bit of everything. And then just take a few more breaths there. And I'm up on forearms here, but you're always welcome to come all the way down and stack your hands, bring your forehead to hands or a block or anything like that there. And then walk yourself back up. Plant your hands. You can either come back to tabletop if that feels like a good place to be for wrists and arms and shoulders, or down dog. And if any of the little movements feel good in between, pedal your legs or make some big circles with your hips, then do that. Okay, and then left knee behind left wrist. Again, maybe support a block, your blanket roll or towel roll underneath your left hip. And then keep your right toes tucked under, straighten out through your right leg. And just give yourself enough support with your hands. It might be a little further forward or walked in wherever feels like the right place. A little hug of your inner legs together. And then press down into your toes, float your kneecap up off your mat. Make a little more sensation through the front of the thigh, in front of the hip flexor. It's what we're going for. And draw your
outer left hip back and let your right pelvis roll forward just a little bit there. Good. Take another full breath. And then bring your knee down. Good. You can walk yourself forward onto forearms, onto hands, whatever feels best for you there. Keep some support through your legs as you also find a little bit of softness, of mobility. And sometimes it's a really fine balance between the two. Right? Enough support, but also softening. And so it plays with kind of hugging in, strengthening, and then where can you let go a little bit? And some of us just need a lot of one or the other by the structure of our bodies. If we tend to have less range of motion in general, maybe we work a little bit more with the fluidity, right? Range of motion and mobility. And if we tend to be really mobile, sometimes it's actually nice to work the stability a little more. I know this is true for me. If we have joints that are really mobile, it can be helpful, especially as we get older, to find more support and strengthen around that tissue. And a couple more breaths. And walk your hands back. And then again, either down dog or tabletop. And pedal out through your legs or take a couple circles with your hips. And then come down to child's pose. Big toes together, knees out wide. Settle your hips back to your heels. And just see maybe this one feels a little bit different from the first one that we did after we've done some good work through the hips. Walk your hands back. Come to sit on your heels and then lie all the way down on your back. And so go ahead and take your feet to your mat, bend your knees, and then just take your feet out a little bit wider. Start with your knees resting together. You can bring your arms out wide or even by your sides if that feels okay. We're going to take a little bit of mobility side to side with breath as we start to wind down here. So with your inhale, fill up through your belly. As you exhale, keep your feet wide, let both knees fall towards your right. Come back up to center, inhale. Use some strength through your belly to help that action, and then exhale to your left. A couple times side to side, inhale, exhale. Strength from your belly to come back to center, and then over to your left. And as you come to the left, you can really stretch out through your right knee, that length along the front of the hip, back to center. When you come to the right, stretch out through your left knee. It's a little extra sometimes. It's a little bit more stretch. And then back to the left. Come back to center. And then bring your feet now so they're hip width apart, heels in line with your sitting bones. Bring your arms by your sides. And press down through your feet. And inhale, lift your hips up, bridge. You might lift just a few inches. Hips might come a little bit higher. What we're getting here is now just one last stability, strength through the glutes, the backside of the hips. And keep your hands right here along by your side. You could snuggle them underneath if that feels okay for your shoulders. As you press down into your heels, traction your heels back towards your shoulders. And then exhale, lower down and take a breath. Let's do one more variation on that here. Keep your feet as they are. Just turn your toes out to the side an inch or two. It's going to get the outer hip to turn on a little bit more than kind of that meaty center part of the glute. And take a breath out. And then inhale, lift your hips up. Again, press down into your heels, traction them back.
And lift your chin towards your chest as you press the top of your head back, or sorry, the back of your head down. Which direction? And then exhale, lower all the way down. One more time, just take your feet wide, then let your knees rest together. Take a couple of breaths. And then hug your knees into your chest one at a time until they're both in. Curl your forehead. You just give everything a big squeeze into center. And then release, let go, Shavasana. Final resting pose. Grab any support that you want. If you want support under your knees, that can feel nice. A blanket, anything under your head. As you get there, close your eyes. Now just let everything settle. Release the effort, the stability. Let there be softness. We find this in our bodies, in our joints, in the muscles. I think it's also something we can find with our breath. Full enough, fluid enough, but not rigid. And we find it in our bodies and our breath. Hopefully then it also helps us with thoughts, with mind. And the places where we're not too locked in, too rigid. There's a little room for movement and creativity. Or if we're prone to the other, right, to the movement in all directions, we find a little structure. We can find it in our bodies, but we can find it, that balance of it in so many other places. And just take a few more moments of rest here. Take some deeper breaths again. And just as you're ready, you can make your way onto your side if that's comfortable. Or eventually just make your way all the way up to sitting. Bring your hands together at your heart. As you anchor back through your seat, sit tall, lift your heart to your hands, and bow your head to your heart. Thank you so much for sharing the practice, the stability, the strength, a little bit of the fluidity and ease. Namaste.